That might mean, walk for 2 minutes, jog for a minute, that type of thing. I think that's a great way to start, especially if, you got a few pounds to lose or you're just not in great shape. Just start with a walking program. It can kind of get complicated, but I sort of view there's like basically 3 types of runs I do per week. You do the long, slow, easy one. You do shorter, easy ones, and then you do an interval workout. And I wouldn't necessarily start with anything too intense. That speed work could just start with a few strides, 30-second speed ups towards the end of one of your easy runs. As far as the strength training, I really only think there's like a handful of exercises that are kind of important to do. Calf raises, tib raises, doesn't have to be a lot.
Welcome to another episode of the Running Tales podcast. I'm Craig Lewis, and that was this week's guest, Jeremy Singh. According to his own Twitter bio, Jeremy went from overweight dad to 6-time ultramarathoner. He now has a 100-mile event in his sights, a target he says is fueled by both a love of running and a desire to do better than his brother. I can't run faster than him, so I'm going further, he told me. Along the way, he has built a strong social media brand with more than 40,000 people following his Twitter hints and advice on everything from strength training, nutrition, running plans, and much more. His Go for a Run catchphrase has proved particularly popular. So I asked him what first made him do just that.
I guess it went back and forth. As a younger kid, I played a lot of baseball, and I was actually pretty good. And I was kind of obsessed with baseball through my high school years. And then afterwards, like in college and in my early 20s is when I kind of started getting a little bit lazier in terms of keeping active in a cardio sense. Like I would hit the gym, but other than hitting the gym, I wasn't taking very good care of myself. I was drinking a lot, eating really unhealthy food, and just kind of packing on some muscle, but a lot of fat too. And it took until about 7 years ago, when I was 35, that I kind of finally started to wake up and realize that, hey, if I continue down this track, this is going to lead to some bad outcomes, right? I have a family history of heart disease, and I had young kids at the time, and I wanted to be a better example for them, be able to keep up with them, run around and play with them. And if I take a step back, my dad had a heart attack when I was about 5 years old, and he recovered. And I like to say that he went from hospital bed to marathon finish line. So that seed was planted back in my head way back as a kid when I was watching him go on training runs and finish marathons. I'd ride my bike with him on a lot of his training runs. And I knew that I always wanted to run a marathon. And I just kept, like the classic running mistakes, right? I would start with a big burst of energy thinking, hey, I'm going to train hard and be able to, check this box of running a marathon. And I would run really hard every day and, push it farther and farther and faster. And, every time it was, shin splints or just being burned out or whatever it was that just brought me back to the couch. And it wasn't until I was 35 that actually I finally listened to my dad's very, very simple advice, which was to slow down, right? And I finally did. And that year, I went 100% slow. I didn't even do any interval training, anything like that. I was just, listening to my body, paying attention to my breathing, trying to breathe through my nose, and then looking at my heart rate zones too, and just saying like, hey, if I hit a hill and it's getting harder, I'm going to walk, right? So there was a lot of walking and running that first year, and that was the first time I was able to do it consistently and not get injured and just very gradually kind of build the distance. And so that year I ran a half marathon, and then the next year I was finally able to get my marathon. And then I kind of just started developing this plan to run a 100-mile race, which I've kind of increased the distance every year since then. And then this year, the plan is to run 100 miles.
That's quite a jump from the marathon, but I'm kind of intrigued, first of all. We all seem to do this as runners, and quite often we do these things as beginner runners, I suppose. We do these things at the same time. We have a massive lack of faith in ourselves that we can run, even though it's one of the most basic human things. And at the same time, when we start, we have this amazing faith in ourselves that we can run really, really fast. So we go out, with both of these things and then wonder why things go wrong.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think, hey, I'm going to start running. Like, I need to get a good workout, right? Like, I need to be that like sweaty, slobbering mess at the end of the run, like every time. And you just can't maintain that, right? The running is too like hard on your body that it takes a really long time to adapt and grow stronger, be able to withstand that impact. And so, yeah, I mean, that's what I did. I was like, oh, I got to get a good workout. I got to push it. And like, I sort of think there's like a trick there, like your fitness like will increase faster than your body's ability to withstand impact, right? So that's what kind of leads to that breakdown. And so, yeah, the solution is slowing down, increasing the distance gradually, and also cross training. I'm a big fan of riding my bike. Usually nowadays it's just like easy recovery rides with my kids, but that's a great way to build your fitness without taking that impact, right? So I've definitely seen some stuff out there like on social media recommending like if you're a beginner runner, if you're going to go run 4 times a week, instead run twice a week and do 2 times something else, whether that's on the bike or swimming, just so you can gradually build that ability to withstand the impact. But yeah, it's definitely a classic mistake. It's an interesting way you put it. I like that you're like overconfident in your ability to do that, but then you also sort of doubt your ability to run at all, which, we were born to run. This is what we were designed to do.
Yeah, exactly. And when it came to the start of your running career, where was that first marathon that you did, and how did it go?
So I live in Massachusetts outside of Boston, and I didn't run the Boston Marathon, and I still haven't run a Boston Marathon. It's on my list to try and see if I can do a fast marathon and qualify after I hit my 100-mile goal. But I ran another marathon, the Bay State Marathon, which is also here in Massachusetts, and I had run. They have a half marathon and a marathon, so I'd run the half marathon the previous year, and I think the marathon was just the same loop going twice. And so I was familiar with the course, and it's in a town where my wife has a lot of family, and so yeah, it was a great experience. It wasn't easy, but some of the emotional highs I experienced during that run, particularly I remember I think it was about mile 17 that I saw my wife and kids, and picked up my younger daughter for a hug, and it was like the most emotional, energy boosting. The few miles after that were some of the fastest miles I ran on that day, and then also just the kind of profound sense of pride and gratitude that I had later that night that I finally achieved this goal that I had wanted to do for so long. And part of me thinks that running farther and farther and doing these longer and longer distance, I'm kind of chasing that feeling again, to have that sense of accomplishment and just gratitude that I'm able to do this thing that I've fallen in love with.
You say you fell in love with running. Was it during that first marathon that you fell in love with it and feeling that accomplishment, or had you already taken some steps along the road? And if so, why?
Yeah. I didn't mention, actually, in high school, in addition to like growing up playing baseball, I did do track, but I was a sprinter. And I like to say that I think when I was 13, I came in second place in Massachusetts for the 200-meter dash, but I lost to a 14-year-old. So I was the fastest 13-year-old at the time. That was pretty fast. So, that was kind of my thing. And I was playing baseball and like stealing bases and stuff like that. And I was always like, when I was younger, I was always the kid who would, if the ball was like kicked across the street or something, I'd go chase it down. Right. So I was always very, very active. But yeah, I think it was that, doing the half marathon the year before, which would be 2017, which was the year that I just fully embraced going slow 100% of the time. I don't do that now. Now I do some speed work, but I think that's when I just really realized that was the way to be able to do this over the long term. And yeah, that's I think was the beginning of me really becoming a runner and yeah, falling in love with the sport.
And so from being the fastest 13-year-old at school, you've gone on to have this goal of 100 miler. which is the other side of the spear, really.
Yeah.
Was that something that just came into your head straight away the moment you finished the marathon? What's the story behind that?
I mean, I think there's a couple things. So I read Born to Run, and was inspired by the ultra marathon and these people, especially when that book came out, whenever it was 10 or 15 years ago. There wasn't a lot of people doing ultra marathons, so it just seemed like this crazy, like to imagine that somebody could even run 100 miles was such a, like, I couldn't even fathom what that would be like. And secondly, I'm a little bit competitive. My brother was a really great runner in high school and college. He used to win half marathons, and my dad, like I said, ran several marathons. And so once I got that marathon, I was like, well, to beat that, I'm not going to beat them. Like, my brother definitely was much faster than me, but I was like, I'm going to go farther. That's how I'm going to beat him. So then I kind of became obsessed with this idea of just going farther and farther, and kind of built out this long-term plan where so 2018, I ran a marathon, then 2019, 50K, the next year, 50 miles, then 60 miles. I was originally going to go for 100 miles last year, and I dropped it to a 75 mile because I felt I just needed another step in there. And yeah, now this October, the plan is to go do 100. And the thing about it is, and I think this is true at other distances too, but it becomes about your mind, right? And the mental aspect of it. Like, you've got to, like, I kind of view 100 miles or like some of these crazy distances, like you're kind of putting yourself at risk. Like, this might not be the healthiest thing for your body, but that's why you only do it maybe once a year. But it does build your mind and your mental toughness, because you're going to get to a place where you just don't want to go anymore. You want to stop. And last year in my 75-mile race, I remember the last 20 miles or so, it was mostly walking. And all I could think about is how much I wanted to be done. But the only way I was going to be done is to keep moving forward. And, I think it prepares you for a lot of things in life, because things aren't always going to go your way, and bad things are going to happen at some point. And to develop your mind in that way, and to me, I'm preparing myself for that. So that's kind of one of the main reasons that I like to push myself on that one day per year, or maybe it'll be longer than 24 hours. But yeah.
Yeah, I think ultra running, from the people I've spoken to, I mean, the furthest I've done is 30, so a long way off something like 100 or even 75. But it is slightly different from the marathon distance. Of course, that's really tough, but you can probably kind of go all out, or as all out as you can, for those 26.2. Generally, when you're getting into those ultra distances, you are walking, you're approaching the whole thing quite differently. As you built up that mileage, did you enjoy that kind of transition into ultra running as much as you'd expected?
Yeah. No, I love pushing myself and seeing like what I'm capable of. And like I said, I kind of did this like progression where it wasn't like I did a marathon, now I'm going to go do 100 the next year. It was less, the year after I did a 50K. So it wasn't like a big jump. So I've just broken it, like a lot of things in life, like big goals that you might have. You want to break them down into steps, into milestones, and think about that whole long-term process. And that's the thing that I love about it, is like I've been able to kind of like shape a lot of my life around running and these goals of going further, because you've got to do all the other things, right? You've got to put in the strength training plan to be able to, not get injured and run better. You've got to sleep well. You've got to eat right. You've got to do all these other healthy habits that just make you stronger and better. And honestly, I mean, like I love like going for, a 3 or 4 hour training run out in the woods. Like there's nothing better than that to me. And that's kind of like my escape, right? I've got, the family, the kids and all that stuff at home, but that's me time, right? I do like going for runs with friends. Usually it's something shorter, but on my long run, I'm just out there, just, enjoying whether I'm thinking or not thinking, kind of just like in the moment and paying attention to things. Just feels really good. It's kind of like, we live in this world where we're like on our phones all the time, on our computers all the time. And it's It's like shut that all off and just be out there in nature and kind of connect with yourself. And that's what I love about it.
100%. Yeah, I think a lot of people I speak to really love that out on their own and finding themselves element of running. So tell people, Jeremy, about the event you're going to take on, about the 100-miler. Where's it taking place and how's everything going in the build-up?
Yeah, this is at this point this year, I feel the strongest that I've ever felt. I finally last year hired a coach. I didn't have a coach before that, and that's kind of made a big difference, even just like offloading the idea of building my own training plan and my own weekly schedule. And a couple years ago, I strained my soleus on my 60-mile run. And since then, I've really kind of had a much more targeted approach with strength training and building my body so that it can withstand, the process of running for 20 hours or 24 hours. And so I feel really great in a great position, although, I'm entering the summer training block here where I'm going to be increasing the distance and running more and more, but I feel great. So the race that I've run the same race the last 2 years. It's called the Ghost Train. It's in southern New Hampshire, not far from where I live. And it's just 7.5 miles out, 7.5 miles back, and you just run as much as you want for 30 hours, which actually makes it really easy logistically. There's 8 stations at either end and one in the middle. And my mother-in-law lives nearby, so my wife and kids will be in and out all day long. So it'll be great to see them. And it's a course that this will be the 3rd time that I've done it, so I'm very familiar with it. So that's there's definitely some convenience factor there. I mean, ultimately, I'd like to, in addition to trying to do a Boston Marathon or qualifying for one, I'd like to do the Hard Rock 100, which is in southwestern Colorado. It goes through a little town, Ouray, Colorado, where I used to spend my summers. My grandmother lived there. And I'm not exactly sure how long that race has been around. I think it started sometime in the 90s. But I think it'd be cool that's a totally different ball game than what I'm doing at elevation, up and down, different kind of training than I would be doing. There's a lot of hiking, but I'd like to get to that race. There's a bunch of hurdles that I have to go through to get there and qualify and get in the lottery and all that stuff. But I think it would be pretty cool to run that one someday.
Yes, it's quite incredible, really. Actually, the variance of different types of ultra runs, whether you're going up the mountains or along a canal or looping there and back or along one of these courses, because actually people can say I'm going to do a 50 or 100-mile race or whatever, but actually within those races they're massively different sometimes and different challenges.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I ran a 50-mile race in 2020. The race that I was going to do was canceled, and so I just came up with a 10-mile loop near my house and just ran it 5 times. And it's actually a great experience. Actually, this sign right here that says "Go Jeremy," my wife made those and put them on the course without me knowing. And so when I started that morning, I started pretty early, like 5 a.m. And then I started seeing this sign all over the place. And the community really came out and supported me. I was able to run with some friends. But that was a pretty easy course. It was just, a lot of bike path and some trails, but pretty smooth, easy trails. Even the 100-mile that I'm doing, the terrain is pretty easy. It's all trail, and there's one kind of technical section that goes up and down a hill, but it's about half a mile long, and the rest of it is just pretty smooth, easy trail. So yeah, there's definitely a huge as far as 100 miles go, it's a relatively easy one. Which makes sense if you think about like how I've been kind of progressing with these little steps over the years, and then hopefully maybe in the few years I'll get to some of those harder mountainous terrain, because the Hard Rock 100, I used to hike those mountains as a kid, so it would be so fun to go back and try and do something like that there.
Well, I think anybody listening to this, apart from 1 or 2 hardened ultra runners, will be probably chuckling to themselves at the idea of an easy 100-miler.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to talk to you, Jeremy, because this is how we connected with each other on Twitter, is about your feed on there, because you've kind of developed your own coaching feed and hints and tips within there. How did that come about? Was that something you'd already planned to do, or?
It was kind of it's been a wild experience on Twitter for me for sure. This last year, I originally had a concept of a book that I wanted to write about running. So if you're familiar with Ryan Holiday, the Stoicism guy, Daily Stoic, it's a page a day reader, January 1st through December 31st, a quote from one of these famous Stoics like Marcus Aurelius, and then his kind of like analysis or take on that. And so I thought of like doing something similar around running, a quote from an athlete, a coach, a leader, and then my like tweet length little analysis of it, and then go walk through some different themes throughout the year, goal setting, habit development, mental toughness, all that stuff. And so I thought, and I started to write this book and started to put it together. And I was like, how am I going to sell this? Right. Like find the runners online, Facebook ads, that type of thing. And I thought, well, why don't I see in the meantime if I can develop an audience online? And so I was writing on Twitter and LinkedIn, the kind of like the writing platforms. And I think on Twitter, I feel like I kind of lucked into this sort of gap in the market where there wasn't a lot of running content like I was putting out. I mean, I follow a lot of, these like really accomplished elite runners, but, they can be hard to relate to, right? Because they've been doing it their whole lives and they're doing it at such a high level that, very few people are going to reach, where I'm definitely not winning any races or anything like that. And, if you want to do the type of thing that I'm doing, you can do it. It might take a few years to get to where I'm at now, but anybody can do this, right? And so I think I'm a little bit more relatable in that way. I'm, on Twitter they would say I'm more of a guide than a guru, right? And then I also had a lot of success on Twitter with video content, like kind of putting out the strength training, the targeted exercises I'm doing to help you with your running, and that stuff started just kind of going nuts. And at the same time, like writing within the constraints of Twitter, I realized that my writing was improving, and learning from other writers and seeing what they were doing on Twitter too. And I've been coached by some writers online, and so I paused the book and was just kind of focused on building the audience. And then the coaching, initially just people reaching out to me asking for help or asking for coaching, and so I started to do it, and I've really been enjoying it. But yeah, it's been a wild ride. Definitely not something that I was expecting to grow and to like. It's interesting when you start having that audience, a lot of different opportunities present themselves, whether it's coaching or building product or on Twitter for a while. I still do it. I post these tweets that are just like a line and then go for a run. And go for a run became like the catchphrase. I've even asked my audience I polled them if they wanted me to stop doing it. And I think 75% or so said, no, keep going. They like seeing that in their feed. And so people are like, when are you going to put this on a t-shirt and sell it? So there's like a lot of different ways that you can, opportunities that present themselves in terms of, monetizing and building a business too. So I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll, for anybody who's interested in finding you, we'll make sure we put the details in the show notes here so they can go and have a little look what you're saying on there. But in terms of some of the tips and stuff that you're giving to runners, I think it quite often comes back to the same thing, because I think it's the right way to do it: strength training and running slower. And I think those would probably be your kind of mantras as well, wouldn't they?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, just like David, Mr. Slow, Easy, Comfortable. Slowing down, I think, is the number one thing. Like I said, the first year I just did that 100%. And then if you're going to do two things, definitely the strength training is so key in preventing injury, coming back from injury, and it's going to increase your running performance. And you're just going to feel better, right? And it doesn't have to be a lot. It doesn't require, a gym membership or expensive equipment. A lot of things you could do. I like to call them exercise snacks, right? You could do calf raises in your kitchen. You can do tib raises when you're waiting in line somewhere. Like, you can just, that's how I approach it now. I just kind of throw in a set here, a set there, and all that stuff really adds up and is going to really protect your body from that impact of running. And then And then, yeah, definitely slowing down, but there is a lot of value in going fast too, even for somebody like me who's just trying to kind of go farther and farther. So nowadays, once a week, I either hit the track and do an interval workout, or there's a local hill that's a pretty good sized hill that I'll just do hill repeats on. And I think that, that's going to build your fitness and it's a great workout. But going fast, that's going to improve your form too, right? Because you have to look up and kind of land more on the front part of your foot and less ground contact time and all these things when you're going fast. And also I used to be a sprinter, so I love coming around that bend on the track and just letting loose and seeing what I still got at 42 years old now.
Yeah. And what would your kind of advice be to people getting into running, or even experienced runners who want to improve, in terms of, I guess, getting that schedule and finding the time to do everything? Because we all sort of start out, we're just going to go for a run. It's nice and easy. It's the easiest sport ever to get into. Stick some trainers on, off you go. And then as we get more into it, you're told, well, sometimes you have to run slow and sometimes you have to run fast, and you need different training sessions for that. Yeah. And then you need to do interval trainings, and then you need to do strength training, and then you need to get your nutrition right, and then you need to sleep properly. It's like, oh my word, all I wanted to do was go for a jog.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can just be like, I'm just going to run slow. I'm just going to go out for easy runs, right? Like, and a lot of people that are beginning, that might mean walking, right? Or that might mean, walk for 2 minutes, jog for a minute, that type of thing. I think that's a great way to start, especially if, you've got a few pounds to lose or you're just not in great shape. Just start with a walking program. And then you can build from there. But you're right that it can kind of get complicated, but I sort of view there's like basically 3 types of runs I do per week. You do the long, slow, easy one. You do shorter, easy ones, and then you do an interval workout. And I wouldn't necessarily start with anything too intense. That speed work could just start with a few strides, 30-second speed ups towards the end of one of your easy runs, and just go from there. And then with, as far as the strength training, I really only think there's like a handful of exercises that are kind of important to do. I mentioned a couple of them: calf raises, tib raises. And, there can be variations on these. You can do them single leg, to make them harder. I've become a really big fan, partially because of David Abbott, of the Bulgarian split squat. I think that's it's like kind of like a running motion, right? You have your back leg behind you and you're kind of squatting on the one leg. It's a great workout. There's some balance there. Doesn't have to be a lot, doesn't have to be complicated. Now, if you have some injuries and stuff, you might want to focus on different things. But yeah, if you want to just boil it down and make it simple, just go out and go easy. Just take it easy, and that might be a walk, might be, something just slightly. You want to keep it. I try and think about a lot of my running now, not in terms of pace and distance, but in terms of time on my feet and effort level, and keeping that effort level low and then slowly building the time on my feet. So when I design a program for my clients now, instead of saying, hey, go run 3 miles or whatever, I'll say, hey, 30 minutes. I don't really care how fast you go or how far you go. I just want you out there on your feet.
Yeah, that's really interesting in terms of, I've heard that from people before, that they will run in time blocks and so on. And in terms of your own improvement, have you found that is what's really improved the strength training? Once you learn these things and start putting these blocks together, that things really started to leap up in terms of how quickly you're improving?
Yeah. It's definitely, I think there might be a misconception about running slow, that it's going to make you a slow runner. But ultimately, like, that slow pace that initially might be, 12 minutes per mile starts to creep down, right? And yeah, you can just take it one step at a time, and you can build from there. And yeah, I mean, you'll be fine. Like, let's not make it more complicated than it has to be, like you said.
And in terms of your own running, the 100 milers coming up, the Boston Marathon is perhaps in the distance as well. Are there any other sort of aims out there for you, or is that taking all of your mind to concentrate on at the moment?
Yeah, I'm pretty focused on the 100 miler right now. I interact with David Abbott on Twitter, and I know he's run some pretty fast 5Ks, and I've come close to breaking 20 minutes on a 5K a few times, and I haven't hit it. And then I think I said it to him in a comment that, this year I'm going to do a 100-miler, and now I'm also going to do a sub 25K, just to opposite ends of the spectrum there. I haven't necessarily put in the work for the 5K goal, but because the primary goal is 100. But I think that'd be pretty cool to be hit those different types of running goals in the same year. But I also just want to be strong and fit. I want to be able to throw my kid over my shoulder, I that type of thing, and keep up with them. So I talk about one of my earliest pieces of content that did well on Twitter was I call it I have these myth busting series, and it was the myth I was busting was cardio kills muscle growth, because a lot of people that work out in the gym think oh, if I do too much cardio, it's going to ruin my gains. I'm not going to get big. And it's not true. Not necessarily that you want to go run a ton, but you've got to eat and all these types of things and organize your training. But I want to be able to run far, but I also just want to be strong. I like to call it the jacked runner, or people call it the hybrid athlete, right? Where you can lift heavy, but you can also just run far. So that's ultimately the goal, because I think that then covers a lot of bases to be able to live healthy for a really long time and be able to stay active for a long time, which is ultimately the goal. I view myself, I like to try and picture myself as 100-year-old, still getting up, getting outside. Maybe it's much slower, but moving forward, sunshine in my eyes in the morning, all that type of stuff. And so then what do I have to do now to get there, right? And running is a big piece of that, but then the strength training and building that strength is there too.
Yeah, it's fascinating what you're saying about the physique of runners, because I think sometimes we see runners at the Olympics or so on, or traditionally every ultra runner or marathon runner who was any good was this stick thin character who would then run really fast over long distances. But that is changing now, and there does seem to be more strength built up, and even the top athletes who are on the face of it very slim are still incredibly strong, aren't they?
Yeah. I'm a big fan of David Goggins. I love his books, and he is a big, really strong guy, but he's come in second place at the Moab 240. He's won a bunch of ultra runs and 100-milers, and he's definitely shown that hey, you can be a big, muscular, strong guy and still run a lot. And I think that's the balance that I'm trying to seek.
Yeah, well, good luck with it, Jeremy. Good luck with the 100-miler as it gets ever closer. I'm sure you'll absolutely smash it. Thank you so much for joining me today on Running Tales.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to get back and listen to the rest of David's episode. But yeah, this has been great. I love talking about running. One quick story, my we'll go out, my wife and I will go out with other couples or parties or whatever. And I'm typically kind of a little bit quieter, a little bit sitting in the back, people are talking about their kids and all that stuff. The topic somehow comes around to running. I cannot shut up. I love talking about this stuff. So this has been a great time. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you.
Thanks again to Jeremy for joining us on today's Running Tales podcast. I hope you enjoyed listening to his story and all those fantastic hints and tips as much as I did. I'll certainly be putting a lot of them into practice. You will also have heard him throughout that refer to David Abbott, Mr. Slow, Easy, Comfortable a few times. You can listen to David's chat with me a couple of those episodes back on the Running Tales podcast, so make sure you check that one out as well. Thanks again for joining me today on Running Tales. If you enjoy what we do, please give us a rating or a review wherever you listen, and we'll see you again next week for another Running Tale.